UN staff who tried to expose alleged wrongdoing. It detailed allegations of corruption, misogyny, management turning a blind eye to wrongdoing, and sexual abuse.
It's about a culture of fear.
Sexual abuse, exploitation and harassment in the UN happens in headquarters. It happens Monday to Friday.
Whistleblowers are often presented as somehow hating the UN altogether and wanting it to be disbanded. That nothing could be further from the truth. We just want it to be better.
Now Newsnight has heard from a former UN senior advisor who has never spoken publicly before and who accuses the organisation of having an oppressive and toxic leadership where people are punished for complaining, something the UN vehemently denies. For the first time, Sinead Andrews has spoken about her experience after spending 14 years with the United Nations, latterly as a senior advisor to the former Under-Secretary General Fabrizio Hochschild in 2019.
So it's very hierarchical, and as a result there's a power dynamic, and that creates this culture of it's hard to explain that you're either pursuing power, you're very loyal to power, or you're afraid of power. So it doesn't create a fertile environment for speaking up because of that. You know, the implications are that you will not get to your next grade, or that people will not hire you for your next job.
She said her boss, Mr. Hochschild, humiliated and intimidated her and others. He was what the UN called separated from the organisation last year after an internal inquiry, but he denies any wrongdoing and calls Ms. Andrews' claims false.
I had always had a pretty strong performance record, and as soon as the first time that I spoke up, I started hearing some feedback that my performance perhaps was being compromised in terms of what the feedback I was getting. What I didn't expect was that the system that was meant to be protecting me as I reported wasn't there for me. And that's the most, to say the very least, disappointing part of it.
Tonight, the UN speaks for the first time following these fresh allegations.
Does the United Nations have a toxic culture? And what I mean by that is that are people punished for speaking out or complaining?
No, the short answer is people are not punished for speaking out and complaining. Like any organization, whether in the private sector, in the government, in the media, we're all trying to improve our culture. And that is something the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has done from day one in office to ensure that people can come forward and will feel protected, whether it's by strengthening the whistleblower policy, improving our ability to investigate accusations of sexual harassment.
But you've watched our BBC investigation, and ever since that investigation came out, I have heard from a dozen people who either are working inside the UN or have recently left. And they are telling me that there is a toxic culture, that it is male-dominated at the top, that bullying is rife. When so many people are saying the same thing, you can't help but think there is something significantly wrong with the way your organisation is operating.
What I can tell you is that systems have been put in place to kind of break what may have been, for decades, this kind of culture. But I can tell you, since the Secretary General came into office, close to 50 people have received whistleblower protection. Senior officials have been dismissed because of sexual harassment. We've seen an increase in the number of people who've reached out to us through the hotline the Secretary General's put in place, or through regular channels. But we are trying, and I feel we have improved the culture.
Can you say that at the moment your organisation is dealing with a cultural problem?
What I can tell you is that we are looking at the problem of male-dominated culture head-on. And Antonio Guterres has done everything that he can in his power to try to change that culture in the UN. It is not a finished project. It is a project that is continually being improved.
Well, let me just give you some quotes from people inside the UN who I've been speaking to. They're terrified of going on the record, so I've got anonymous quotes from them. Women are second-class citizens. The top of the organisation is run by men who think they're better. Fact. Another person. Since introducing a gender strategy and action plan, there has been a systematic assault on women's reputations and credibility, particularly those with solid experience and loyalty to the international civil service. Female hire at the senior-most political level is weak and beholden to the SG, and this is how the patriarchy in the UN is protected.
Well, I think that's wrong. I mean, I've had the privilege of working with the senior women who surround the Secretary General, and I can tell you one thing, they are anything but weak. The gender strategy has been to reach parity at the senior-most levels at jobs that he can himself appoint, which is Assistant Secretary Generals and Under-Secretary Generals. We have now basically 50-50 parity.
Perna Sen was the UN's lead on sexual harassment. She told the BBC's original documentary that women working for the UN were vulnerable to sexual abuse.
I think the United Nations has become a place where predators feel safe. There are women in various parts of the United Nations, most likely all parts, who have been approached, they have been accosted, they have been raped. And the more we let the men who do this get away with it, the more they will keep doing it.
She left the UN less than 2 years ago.
She worked with alleged victims of abuse, and she says it's shocking how many women have complained about harassment.
It's not for me to question what she saw or what she perceived as seeing. This is an issue that we're tackling head on, that we have improved on, and we're constantly trying to improve.
And you're talking about harassment per se there, are you?
The Secretary General does not oversee all of it. There are a lot of independent agencies, independent entities. However, as the coordinator of the system, he has pushed through and now created what we call the clear check system, which is sort of akin to a no-fly list, which means if someone is dismissed for sexual harassment or leaves before an investigation is finished in one part of the system, that person is then on this clear check list, and hiring managers have to look at that list so we know that one person who is let go from one part of the system cannot be rehired in a different part of the system.
Some people watching this might think that you have a grudge against the UN because your career didn't work out how you had envisaged it to. What would you say to them?
Firstly, it was my decision to leave. Secondly, my performance was never under question. I was witnessing bad behaviour and reporting and calling it out. So I don't have a grudge. I actually think that the UN is very important in the work that it's doing.
The UN aims to help people's lives, especially those in struggling countries. But these fresh allegations raise more questions about how it's treating its own staff. The UN says it has nothing to hide and is working tirelessly to improve its